Wow, folks, so the Trump indictment in the January 6th case has finally dropped. We've been talking about it for months, years even, and now it's finally here. And I have to say, it's quite remarkable. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing. I was waiting to record something today until the indictment came out. It just came down like a half hour ago, and I'm going to try and read as much of it later. I just basically skimmed it for now. I've read some of the summaries. Obviously, I know what the charges are. And it's really quite remarkable. Just the first charge, not even getting to the rest of them. So the four charges, it was fraud against the United States. It was conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction to prevent an official proceeding, and then conspiracy to, what was it? Conspiracy against rights. Those are the four charges. And the first one, actually, it was conspiracy to defraud the United States, which is hilarious. You can just defraud the United States, like the United States is a victim here. The whole United States has been defrauded by Donald J. Trump. He's the biggest con man in the world. He defrauded the entire country. Imagine that. Now, the other charges should look familiar because they're very common amongst the January 6th defendants, particularly the folks who have gotten really long sentences, like the conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. That's what they threw at all these people who just committed trespassing. And arguably they didn't even do that, but they were, if you wanted to charge them with something, you would charge them with trespassing, not conspiracy to, the actual act, obstruction of an official proceeding. Like, what's his name? The QAnon shaman. I think that was one of his charges that he was convicted on, was obstructing an official proceeding. Because, look, he was on the Senate floor. And so now Trump, who wasn't even in the Capitol, he is being charged with this as well, which is, it's just great. Now, the first one, I actually read some from the indictment because Zero Hedge picked it out and put it in their article, which I usually link to Zero Hedge articles just because I like Zero Hedge. I like to drive traffic to them, even though the site is cancer. Like, never open it on your computer. You need it like on a phone with lots of ad block. And even then, the site keeps crashing. But you know what? I love Zero Hedge. So I link to them and antiwar.com as much as I can. So anyway, how did Trump defraud the United States? What was this act of fraud he committed? Well, the fraud, and this is a crime that he's been indicted of, his criminal fraud was insisting that the election had been stolen. That's it. Because they're saying Trump knew that the election was fine and that there were no illegal votes and that everything was on the up and up. This was this was the most secure election in American history. Trump knew it. And so therefore, by insisting that the election was not fair and was not legitimate, he committed fraud. That's an act of fraud. Now, normally fraud is something that we say for, when someone, let's say, enters into a contract and insists, hey, I can provide you a supply of, let's say, a truckload of Michelin tires. But what actually shows up when you order this truckload of Michelin tires from the now defunct Yellow Corporation, what you actually get is a truckload of Milestar tires that have been they've had the name scraped off and then the Michelin name embossed over them. And so they are not Michelin tires by any stretch, but they say Michelin tires on them, and you paid for Michelin tires. That's an act of fraud. When someone says, hey, I think that what the government is telling us is not true, i.e., hey, this was a really free and fair election, and Joe Biden won in a landslide. He's got more votes than anyone in history. Now, if you disagree with that, that's fraud. A disagreement, an opinion, is fraud. In the Michelin tire example, it's not an opinion that, oh, well, these are Michelin tires. No, it would be accurate to say, well, these are tires that have the word Michelin printed on them, but they're clearly not Michelin tires. That is objectively false. But if you have an opinion about something that the government says, and you say, you know what, I think I disagree with the government's official stance, that opinion is not also fraud. And so what you put at the top of your indictment, from what I understand, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I understand, lawyers put the top charge, the top line, that's their best charge that they've got. That's their most solid case. And that's what they went with. That's the best they got on Trump. Is that, well, he said that the election was stolen. And that's mean. That's wrong. He made people think that democracy isn't actually really, really secure, and America is less democratic than we insist. And yes, the stutters, I was trying to purposefully sound stupid and not use the right words. I wasn't just at a loss for words, although I wouldn't blame you for thinking that I was, because who's not at a loss for words these days? I mean, with this crap. So, at this stage, there is still one thing up in the air. Many people, I think, were expecting Trump to be charged with insurrection or sedition. And sedition carries the death penalty, by the way. That's the levels of absurd that we're at. And so they actually, arguably, have gone light on Trump. They've gone easy on Trump by not indicting him with this crime that carries the death penalty. And yes, even though the indictment does have the word Confederate in it, it's not referring to the Confederacy. It's using Confederate, with a lowercase c, meaning like accomplices. And so just because the indictment describes Trump as a Confederate, that does not make it a good argument, if he's convicted on these charges, that Trump is actually a Confederate and therefore can be disqualified under the 14th Amendment. I don't know what they would... I guess they would try any of these to use the 14th Amendment to disqualify him from running for president. Maybe defraud, yeah. I mean, defrauding the United States, I guess because the indictment says that the goal of the fraud was to overthrow our democratic elections. So I guess that's what they'll use. They'll take that language. Okay, Trump was convicted of trying to overthrow the elected government of the United States, even though he wasn't convicted of insurrection, which you're describing there as an insurrection. If you're trying to overthrow the elected government, that's an insurrection. That's a mutiny. It's a rebellion. It's sedition. They didn't charge him with sedition. No, they didn't. They charged him with fraud. But then in the fraud, they describe what is essentially sedition. And so even if sedition charges don't come later, if he's convicted of this, they can bring up the 14th Amendment in these various purple states, Democrat attorney generals in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona. I think Nevada, do they have a Democrat attorney general? I know they have a Republican governor. I know they used to have a Republican attorney general. I think the current attorney general, though, is a Democrat, and that would be a big blow, because I think Nevada is one of the states that Trump needs to flip. But anyway, hell, I could even see Georgia at this point. I think, I forget who the attorney general is in Georgia. But anyway, a bunch of states, plus all the blue states, of course, would bring this up, say, look, Trump has been, even if he's just charged, maybe just the indictment is enough. It's saying, hey, there's this question that's been brought up legally. This man is indicted for essentially rising up against the United States. And so therefore, under the 14th Amendment, we must disqualify him. And even if they don't do that, they could put him in prison for 20 years, plus whatever. I mean, at this stage, it doesn't even matter. Even if they sentence Trump to death, he would probably die on death row before he actually, exhausted all of his appeals and was able to be executed. So they don't even need to give him the death penalty. They just need to put him in jail. Or in prison, I mean. And then he will die in prison, because he's an old man. He's in his 70s. And so this is easily the most important indictment so far. These are the real ones. These are like big-time crimes. The other ones, in my opinion, were, I mean, just petty. Petty, to say the least. But this is what the left has really wanted. And by the left, I mean, MSNBC viewers. I don't mean like, actual ideologues. I mean people who hate Trump. The hate Trump crowd, they've wanted Trump to be charged for January 6th. He's a criminal. He's an insurrectionist. And this defraud the United States charge tries to act as a substitute for sedition. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow. This is going to be an interesting election. Perhaps the most interesting election of my lifetime by far. Perhaps.